14 years after he was convicted for the torture murder of 33 young men and boys, John Wayne Gacy has been executed.
At 6:30 a.m. on the early morning of May 9th, 1994, John Wayne Gacy awoke in his prison cell, fully aware that these would be his final hours. The reality of his impending execution loomed large as the clock ticked away. After 14 years of near-total isolation in prison, the man once known as Pogo the Clown was facing the end of the line. Gacy had spent those years in solitary confinement, with minimal contact with the outside world. He filled his time painting eerie depictions of clowns, but today, the brush would be set aside for good. Gacy had spent his years on death row under constant surveillance, his every move meticulously monitored. This morning, though, the usual routine carried a heavier weight. Prison staff carried out their duties, serving Gacy a simple breakfast of eggs, toast, and coffee. Despite the gravity of his situation, Gacy remained disturbingly calm, showing no signs of fear or remorse. Throughout his time on death row, Gacy had been vocal about his innocence, casting himself as a victim of a corrupt justice system. But with the end now in sight, even he must have known that the curtain was about to fall on his twisted performance. The day had finally come for him to answer for the at least 33 young men he had tortured and brutally murdered. By 9 a.m. that morning, Gacy began receiving visitors. His mother had passed away years before, and the rest of his family had severed ties, unable to reconcile with his monstrous acts, except for one person, his little sister, Karen Gacy Kuzma. Despite everything, Karen stood by his side in those final hours, unable to let go of the bond they had shared since childhood, a bond that even the horrors of his crimes couldn't completely destroy. In a chilling photo from that day, they're seen hugging and smiling, as if the looming execution and the weight of his crimes didn't exist. Her loyalty wasn't about approval, but rather a deep sibling connection she couldn't abandon. As the morning went on, his legal team and spiritual advisors also joined them, working frantically on last-minute appeals. But the chances of a reprieve were slim, and everyone, including Gacy, knew it. Even in those final hours, he clung to his innocence, spinning tales of conspiracy and injustice, insisting he'd been framed. Karen sat nearby, watching the brother she had once known vanish behind the monstrous persona he had become. There was no sign of remorse, no acknowledgement of the lives he had destroyed, only the cold, detached demeanor that defined the psychopathic mind behind his crimes. By the early afternoon, around 2 p.m., a Catholic priest arrived to administer the last rites, a solemn ritual for those facing imminent death. Gacy, who had converted to Catholicism while on death row, had requested this final act. It marked a sobering end to a life defined by darkness. As evening approached, around 5 p.m., tension gripped the prison. Outside, a crowd had gathered, some protesting the death penalty, others eagerly awaiting justice. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, the walls of the prison seemingly bracing for what was to come. As the final hours drew near, the prison staff began the final preparations for the execution. Gacy was moved to a holding cell located just steps away from the execution chamber at Stateville Correctional Center. The guards watched his every move with heightened vigilance to prevent any last-minute attempts at escape or self-harm. The atmosphere in the facility was charged with an oppressive weight, as everyone present was acutely aware of what was about to happen. At around 7 p.m., Gacy was given his final meal, a request that revealed a chilling normalcy: a bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken, a dozen fried shrimp, French fries, fresh strawberries, and a Diet Coke. This meal was a dark nod to his past as a manager of 3 KFC restaurants, a twisted reminder of the facade he had maintained, a facade that starkly contrasted with the horrific crimes he had committed and the man he had become. After his meal, Gacy was allowed to shower and change into a simple prison uniform. He declined the offer to make a final phone call and spent his remaining time talking with his spiritual advisor and legal team. His thoughts still fixated on his case and the injustice he believed had been done to him. The guards watched closely, but Gacy remained calm, detached, and utterly unrepentant. At around 11:30 p.m., the fateful moment had come. John Wayne Gacy was escorted from his holding cell to the execution chamber. Though the distance was short, each step carried an overwhelming sense of finality. Flanked by a group of stern-faced prison guards, Gacy moved with a steady gait. A chaplain accompanied him, offering spiritual comfort in these last moments. Inside the execution chamber, Gacy was strapped to a gurney for the lethal injection. The room was sterile and clinical, designed to end lives with as little drama as possible. Behind a glass partition, a small group of witnesses gathered. Media representatives, victims' family members, and law enforcement officials. When the moment came for John Wayne Gacy to make a final statement, the room fell into an expectant silence. All eyes were on him, waiting for perhaps a hint of remorse, an acknowledgement of the countless lives he had destroyed. Instead, Gacy met the moment with a cold and defiant sneer. His lips curled into a smirk as he uttered the words, "Kiss my ass." A final act of rebellion from a man who had spent his life manipulating and terrorizing others. There was no apology, no reflection on the horrors he had inflicted, only a chilling dismissal of the gravity of the situation. At 12:01 a.m. on May 10th, the lethal injection process began. The execution used a 3-drug cocktail meant to bring a swift end. An anesthetic to induce unconsciousness, a paralytic agent to stop breathing, and potassium chloride to stop the heart. In a grim twist, the execution did not proceed smoothly. The intravenous lines became clogged, causing an agonizing delay. For 18 long minutes, Gacy lay on the gurney, silent and expressionless, as technicians worked frantically to fix the issue. The tension in the room was unbearable, but eventually, the procedure was completed, and at 12:58 a.m., John Wayne Gacy was pronounced dead. By 3 a.m. that night, Gacy's body was taken to the Illinois Department of Corrections Medical Center for an autopsy, as required by law. The autopsy confirmed the cause of death as lethal injection, with meticulous details documented. Scientists removed Gacy's brain in hopes of uncovering explanations for his crimes, but no significant abnormalities were discovered. 3 days later, Gacy's remains were cremated, and his ashes were returned to his family. Unlike other infamous criminals whose graves become sites of morbid fascination, Gacy's final resting place remains private. There would be no memorial, no marker, just the ashes of a man who caused so much pain. The execution of John Wayne Gacy closed one of the darkest chapters in American criminal history. For the families of his victims, some of whom witnessed his final moments, there was a sense of relief that justice had been served. Yet, the pain and trauma caused by Gacy's actions will never fully fade. Gacy's final 24 hours were a haunting blend of routine and tension, a grim countdown to a life steeped in horror. From his last meal to his chilling final words, each moment reflected the monstrous man who had terrorized so many. Even in death, Gacy remained a figure of defiance, a man who had taken many lives and given nothing back. His final hours were a testament to the monstrous nature of his life, a life that ended as it had been lived, without redemption or regret. Gacy's legacy is dark and complex, marked by his status as one of history's most notorious serial killers. His case continues to captivate criminologists, psychologists, and true crime enthusiasts alike. I hope you found this deep dive into John Wayne Gacy's grim tale compelling. For more content exploring the darker corners of history, hit that subscribe button. And remember, as Gacy's final words went, kiss my ass if you don't.